Pushing Back the Shadows, support and awareness for mental health. Hello and welcome to episode 29 of the Pushing Back the Shadows podcast. So my name is Alex Davis. I'm the founder and the main author behind Pushing Back the Shadows. Right at the beginning of this episode, before we get into anything else, I'd just like to take a moment to thank our patrons over at Patreon. So for those of you who don't know, Patreon is a way of supporting the work that we do in a financial way. We do have running costs. We have hosting costs for the website and also some of the certificates that need to go on there. We also have hosting costs for the podcast. And so Patreon even is just a way of you guys being able to say thank you to us for the content that we produce. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Shirley, Louise, Katie, Luce, Samantha, Cheryl, Yi, Tamara and Alex. Thank you ever so much for the support that you give us. It really does mean a lot and it helps us get more of the content out there and spread the message of mental health awareness. So, on to today's episode. It's another step in my journey, and I am looking today at how depression is emptiness. Now, I've said before, this is something that is not necessarily exclusive to me, but this is done from my perspective, and it may be that other people can identify with it, it may be that they can't. Depression is a very unique and individual illness, and it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all. So with that being said, let's launch into the episode. So it's the next step in my journey. I've talked a bit about depression being a liar, being a comforter, being darkness, and now I want to talk about it being emptiness. Now, if you're not very familiar with depression, that might sound a bit peculiar. Emptiness? Depression? Really? I thought it was just sadness. And that's a common misconception that's been kind of painted a lot in the world and society today. I've seen a couple of images go through on social media where it says what society thinks depression is, and it's got an outline of a person. It's filled in with sadness. Just one colour, sadness. What depression actually feels like, and it's got another outline of a person, and it's got plenty of different colours, plenty of different things, and sadness itself only makes up one part of depression. So to me, depression is emptiness. Those of you who follow the blog will probably remember sometime back in August, back in August, when I published The Harrowing Void, which was my take on how depression affects me personally. It's another step in my journey, and I will link the post, as always, for you guys below. But The Harrowing Void talked about what I feel, or in this case, what I don't feel inside of me when my depression is really, really kind of playing up. So, I know when I'm stuck in depression because I just stop feeling. And I do, I really stop feeling. There's almost like there's a void inside of me. It's taken away all thoughts, all emotions, everything. Gone. It's usually kind of prominent because people will notice I'm kind of staring into space. I'm not really reacting to much beyond kind of maybe a small smile or just kind of verbal responses. That's all I give. And that is very much how depression can feel for me. See, it's not so much about getting sad, although that does happen, but most of the time it's that numbness. So I'd like to tell you a little story. And this happened to me on Monday the 5th of March, so sometime last week. I didn't have a particularly bad night's sleep, as far as I'm aware, but when I woke up it was one of those just kind of roll over, go back to sleep, I can't do this. And it took me a while to get out of bed. It was one of those days, when you just kind of switch on the tablet, boot up something to watch, and yeah, I may have watched like 3 or 4 episodes of American Horror Story. Yeah, I'm playing catch up with that one. I'm on season 3, but it's really good. I'd watch it. But so it took me ages to get out of bed, and then I kind of made my way to the shower. And it comes to something when, because normally I can be showered and dressed in about 10, 15 minutes if I'm really rushing. 20 minutes if I'm really kind of taking my time a bit. And it came to the point when I ended up in the shower showering, getting dressed for an hour because I just couldn't bring myself to move. It was almost as though I was paralyzed. Have you ever felt like that? I mean, if you suffer with depression already, you might know what I'm talking about. But it was one of those things where I just couldn't seem to move. Another example would be, because after the shower I had to get dressed, and that took me a while as well. But then I kind of sat down in my chair, knowing that I needed to kind of get myself some breakfast and stuff. And it was kind of the minute I sat down, it was almost like I was glued to the chair and my feet were glued to the floor. I knew I had to go and get some food because I knew I had to eat. But there was just apathy. I didn't want to go. I couldn't seem to bring myself to move, and it was almost like my brain was saying, go get food. And my body was saying, yeah, no, stuff you, I ain't moving. And it was kind of, it gives a whole new meaning to the phrase in two minds. But it was like I couldn't control my body. I knew what I had to do, I just couldn't do it. Now, to give you another example, back in 2011, my grandma was quite ill, and unfortunately she did pass away after that, but she stayed with us for a bit, and it was a case of, she had a wheelchair to get her about, because she couldn't manage to get to different places, and sometimes getting her out of the chair was quite a struggle. Most of the time she could do it on her own, but sometimes it was kind of she'd try and fail, and then she'd stand up, and it would be, she'd just look at her feet, and it's like, well, they're not going anywhere. That was the thing. She knew exactly what she wanted to do, but it wasn't happening. And it's very similar with depression. You know what you have to do. You just can't. And I think that's sometimes where this perception of, oh, you're not depressed, you're just lazy, kind of comes into it. Because people don't see the mental struggle, the mental battle that we have to go through. I've said before, sometimes when I'm having to try and motivate myself, particularly when I was still working at the bank and I was struggling then, it was a case of, I had to convince myself to do whatever I had to do. Convince myself to put my shirt on, convince myself to put my trousers on, convince myself to have something to eat. And it was very much along those lines. You have to tell yourself, yes, I need to do this. I need to get moving. And sometimes it can be really, really, really hard. Especially if you've not had a good night's sleep, or if you're already running low on your energy. And yeah, it's difficult. So when I say that it's emptiness, it's numb, there's no thoughts, no emotions, or very few thoughts. It is empty. It's like I am a shell, a hollow person. And that's a lot like it kind of how it feels. Where does that leave me? Let's find out. You're listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. Where does that leave me then? Take that empty, hollow, possibly even broken feeling, and where does that leave me? Where do I end up? Now, sometimes it just kind of goes on its own. In fact, I think most of the time nowadays when I'm trying to deal with it, it goes kind of on its own. I either get myself to do something or somebody else encourages me to do something, and that's very much how it tends to be. As soon as I get moving, it helps. Could be the medication, could be that I am getting used to it, I don't know. I'll be honest that I don't know. I don't know what makes me move. But before then, before it started to happen like this, I turned to different coping mechanisms to try and get through. And I say different coping mechanisms, there was really only one coping mechanism that I actually found. Because originally it was, I'd try and convince myself, I'd say, look, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do the other. And I'd be trying to get myself to do stuff. And it didn't work. And when I say it didn't work, I mean it really did not work. No matter what I tried, I could not seem to get moving. Occasionally, kind of using almost like a reward system, managed to work to get me moving. Like, for example, when I'm getting ready for work, put the shirt on, have a biscuit, put the trousers on, bit of a cup of tea, put my shoes on, another bit of cup of tea or another biscuit or whatever. But really when trying to feel things, to get rid of that emptiness, I kind of, first off, I went down the route of, putting TV on, comedies, or things like that. And I think that's where kind of nowadays I'm a lot keener on like the horror type genre, because I just can't seem to connect properly. I almost detach myself a bit. I love the jump factor, don't get me wrong, but some of the other bits, it's like, when me and Cheryl were sat watching something, we watched It the other night, and I've never seen anybody jump quite as much. But I was just sat there, and it was, okay, I jumped, but all the other bits where she's going, oh no, can't do that, can't do that, and so I go, me, it's alright, I like it. But anyway, that's getting off topic, although I did find that really good. But anyway, one of the things that I found worked, and just to put this out there is a potential trigger warning here, and I am by no means advocating this. I turned to self-harm. And I've explained before in both the podcast and in various posts that I've written why I turned to self-harm. I mean, you think about it. Imagine for a second you've got a headache. Blinding headache that you just can't get rid of. It's just there. It's kind of all-encompassing. You cannot break through it. Then you stub your toe hard on the door. With the exception of all the expletives that probably come out of your mouth at that point, and the threats to tear the door down, chop it into little pieces and burn it, how much pain are you then in with your toe? And how much is your headache bothering you at that point? I'll go out on a limb and say it's probably not bothering you quite so much because you've got that distraction. And that's kind of how self-harm had worked. I was empty. I needed either a distraction from what I was going through, or I needed to feel. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what is a more surefire way of getting you to feel than actual physical pain? Just the simple act of inflicting pain on yourself, be it through cutting, burning, whatever it is that you're using at that point. What is more guaranteed to get you to feel? Now, it probably sounds a bit weird, but Let me take a step back a second and explain that in a bit more depth. So imagine for a second that you're me. You're sitting there, you can't feel anything. You've really just got that apathy that's overwhelming you. You know, there's no emotions. Everything's just kind of meh, as they say. And there is nothing that you can seem to do to break out of that. And you want to know, can you still feel? Even things like, and last week I told you about how the toddler, the 3-year-old, kind of sat there and said, you know, oh, last week I was a baby in mummy's tummy, but it was an accident because mummy and daddy were making cupcakes. You know, something as daft as that normally makes me smile. On really, really bad days like this, where I'm empty, even that doesn't get a smile. Even that doesn't change how I'm feeling. Admittedly, nowadays it is a bit better, but at that point, so imagine there's nothing there, and you want to know if you can still feel. So you grab something, and you inflict pain on yourself, and suddenly you can feel. No, it's not a pleasant sensation. Although really, when you get to that kind of point, anything that you're feeling counts as a pleasant sensation, because you're feeling. And that's what you want. But that's my point. You are feeling. You're reminding yourself that you can still feel. You're also attempting to break free from that cycle. Because admittedly, once you've kind of self-harmed in whatever way that would be, you're then sitting there and you might feel guilt. You might feel worry, there might be a bit of panic of, oh my goodness, I'm bleeding quite a bit, I need to sort that out. Whatever happens afterwards it's different for everybody. But it can break you out of that cycle. And that was predominantly, for a while, the main thing that I would turn to ensure that I felt. Now, as I said just before I started talking about it, it's not a healthy coping mechanism. It's not a particularly good one. Yes, it's effective, but it's damaging. If you do it often enough or deep enough, the scars can be there for the rest of your life, even after you get out of the depression, if that's a possibility. And it can cause a lot of kind of hurt, worry, and upset around you. And I'm not saying that to kind of anybody who does it to guilt trip them, because no, just no. And there is an upcoming post on that coming. But realistically, it happens. Self-harm does happen. People do use it to cope. But that, for me, is how I got through the emptiness, the numbness, the harrowing void. Now, as I say, I employ slightly different coping mechanisms. And some of these you'll have heard before, some of these you won't. And I'd like to tell you about them, because who knows, you might find similar coping mechanisms to be quite effective. So let's have a look. Enable Pushing Back the Shadows to continue supporting people in the mental health community, their friends and their family. By pledging just $1 a month, you could help us to continue supporting people with depression, with anxiety, with bipolar and other mental illnesses. You can also unlock exclusive rewards, behind the scenes, sneak previews of upcoming posts and much, much more. So head over to www.patreon.com/Alex Davis PBTS to find out more. How then do I cope with the emptiness? And really, this is something that, again, is going to be quite subjective. Because really, different things work for different people. So sometimes And I'll be completely honest here, sometimes I just have to roll with it. There's nothing I can do or say that will occupy me otherwise. And it's a case of I've just got to power through. It sounds not quite what I'm trying to say, but I do have to effectively try and power through. So I tend to find that it's a case of I have to convince myself, yes, I still need to do this, I still need to do that, I have to do it, and I have to get it done. Now, this approach works better when you've got somebody alongside you to kind of chivvy you along. Something that Cheryl does a lot for me. She'll chivvy me left, right and centre, come on, let's get you out of the door for a bit, or come on, you need food, so let's go and get stuff from the shops, and these sorts of things. And that approach definitely can sometimes work. But the other approach that I tend to use is I try and find some kind of distraction nowadays. I've mentioned a couple of times playing Fallout. That, while it doesn't necessarily make me feel anything, it keeps me occupied. And that is one of the key things that I want to get across to you in this podcast episode. Occupying yourself. Now, I know to a certain extent that kind of makes you sound like a toddler, because goodness knows how much occupying we have to do with the little one. But occupying yourself can keep you from doing anything that you'd rather not do. Or perhaps something that you want to do that you know isn't necessarily going to be the best thing for you. So like me with self-harm, I still get the thoughts. And I do. I don't know whether they'll ever go away, but I still get the thoughts. But occupying myself, most of the time nowadays, keeps me from acting on them. I say most of the time because sometimes I need, a friend on the phone or to come round or something so that I know I definitely can't go and do it. But occupying myself perhaps through a game or something else can be a good way of kind of powering through, because most of the time, at least in my experience, these things pass. And they do. Granted, not necessarily for everyone, but for me, they pass. I could go to bed tonight, wake up tomorrow completely and utterly empty. I could go to bed tomorrow night and then wake up on Wednesday and be back to the self that you can hear over the podcasts. And actually, while I think about it, when I say hear over the podcast, occasionally, and this is for those of you who are quite keen listeners, you might have been able to pick up on when I'm not on such a good day, because you can hear now, I'm kind of, my tone's going up and it's going down, it's kind of a little bit bouncy, and particularly in like last week's episode, I did a bit of laughing and that sort of thing. But when I'm not, and I'm emptier, my voice tends to go a little bit quieter and a little bit flatter, and it kind of comes out a bit more like this, because I don't really have the energy to put into it. I mean, you can see the difference. Yeah, okay, I'm putting that one on today, because I am actually fairly decent today. It's quite a good day. But yeah, anyway, occupying yourself can be very, very good. It doesn't have to be a video game. If there's a book or a song or a TV program that you like, or perhaps an instrument or drawing or writing, something along those lines. And a lot of therapists seem to say, particularly along the creative route, like the writing or the drawing or whatever, those can help you get your thoughts out. Admittedly, with the emptiness, there aren't that many thoughts that I have, but it can kind of express how you feel, and that in turn can actually start making you feel a bit better. So if I'm on a bad day, and by bad day in this case I mean empty, I usually go through a couple of things. I try video games. If they don't work, I'll then move on to something television based. Occasionally, if that doesn't work, I'll kind of send myself to bed and try and sleep it off, which doesn't always work. Sometimes I'm tossing and turning. But those are the three things that I tend to do. So that's all from me. What I'd like to do at this point is actually open it up for you to share your coping mechanisms with me. And what I'd also like to do is just kind of mention some of those in next week's episode. So once we've got some together, it'll be great to have a little featurette of what works for you guys, what doesn't work for you guys, and if you can relate to what I'm saying. Because for all I know, you're sitting there on the other end of this podcast, and you're thinking, Alex, what on earth? What are you talking about? Or, to quote the 3-year-old who's picked this up off me, she'll look at me and she'll say, Alexander Davis, I have absolutely no idea what you're waffling on about. So, you never know. You may be thinking you don't know what I'm talking about. Or you may be thinking that you do and you can relate. I'd love to know. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, email, Google+, Instagram. Take your pick. All the information is on the website, www.pushingbacktheshadows.com. But as I say, that's all from me. You guys have a great week. I shall catch you next week for episode 30. Golly me, 30. You know, I said about 25 was a good number. 30 sounds even better. So, yep, have a good week. You've been listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. To find out more, head over to pushingbacktheshadows.com and hit subscribe to get all of our latest updates straight to your inbox. Alternatively, connect with us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/AlexDavisPBTS, or you can visit us on Twitter at AlexDavisPBTS. Enable Pushing Back the Shadows to continue supporting people in the mental health community, their friends and their family. By pledging just $1 a month, you could help us to continue supporting people with depression, with anxiety, with bipolar and other mental illnesses. You can also unlock exclusive rewards, behind the scenes, sneak previews of upcoming posts and much, much more. So head over to www.patreon.com/AlexDavisPBTS to find out more.